Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, station manager for Manatee Educational Television. It's our great privilege to have with us today Ken Sheelan, co-chair of Equality Florida, and Valerie Fisher, board president of the PRISM Youth Initiative, to talk about the aftermath of the terrible tragedy in Orlando and their efforts in our community to bring kind of an understanding and education. Ken, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Valerie, it's always great to see you.
Thank you.
The tragedy that was in Orlando was a terrible, terrible thing that impacted across this state and across the nation and across the world. You as leaders in this community have had to stand by and kind of help pick up the pieces. Today we want to talk about the efforts that can be made and are being made to help bring together our community and the LGBT community. Ken, this was a terrible tragedy that happened, and Equality Florida has been right there helping in the aftermath.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Sunday morning, as soon as we heard about the tragedy, we created a fund on the website GoFundMe, and we set a $500,000 goal for helping victims of that shooting. And within hours of setting that goal and setting the fund up, we blew past that $500,000 thing. Well, anyway, now here we are a week later, or a week and a half later, right, and we have raised over $6 million. We've had tens of thousands of contributors, $5, $10, $20 contributors, and we've had contributors from 120 countries. This event has galvanized not just the gay community, but it has galvanized everybody who is angry about this kind of hate taking advantage of a community of people who were simply out for a good time.
Exactly.
And killing them in cold blood.
It's a terrible tragedy. And you know, and kudos to Equality Florida for their efforts, their immediate efforts to kind of outreach to the families and the survivors. And you know, the response that you have received really surpasses all expectations, but at the same time shows how a community, how a state, how a nation, how a world can come together to try to help.
But it's not just the LGBT community that has
exactly.
responded.
Right.
It's the entire community. And it says something very clearly, and that is we're not going to take it any longer. We support equal treatment and equal rights for everybody, including the LGBT community, and we're not going to put up with this kind of treatment of anybody.
And you know, very much so. And I think, you know, as the result of this, you know, you've seen a kind of a community looking at the LGBT community and saying, how can we help? How can we outrage? And Valerie, I just want to, you know, you're involved with youth, you
yes,
know, very much. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about, you know, how you're outreaching to the youth in this community and around the state, around the region, to help them kind of get through this tragedy.
Well, my involvement is through PRISM Youth, mm-hmm, and PRISM Youth is specifically designed to create a safe space for youth, LGBT and questioning youth in Manatee County, so that they have a place to just be. And of course, when we heard the terrible news, we set out to our youth just the whole notion that they could reach out at any time, that we would be able to provide information and counseling and grief counseling and support. And one of the first things, of course, that this local community did was to have a candlelight vigil on the Monday night, and several of our youth came, and I was really hit by their deep and profound reaction. I mean, they were in tears, they were just devastated by what had happened. Subsequently, I've been to different places, and usually when I go, we bring at least a youth to represent the youth. And other youth have now been impacted to the point where they're really worried about being targeted So on the one hand, we have seen people all over the world stepping up and providing what Ken has talked about, you know, the notion that we support you, we embrace you, you're part of humanity. And I think too, for the LGBT community and the youth that are LGBT, it's unfortunately a reminder that this kind of targeting, this kind of hate is something, it's not new to us.
Right.
And it makes it fresh, and it makes it to the surface.
And it's very evident, you know, that while tragedies like this, you know, I mean, obviously bring out the worst in certain elements of people, I would suggest to you that the LGBT community, especially young people, they're very vulnerable anyway. They feel vulnerable.
Right.
And an event like this brings that kind of up to the surface a little bit. And I think that's a key thing. Now, many people, while they're being very supportive of the LGBT community, there's still a lot of hate speak that's out there. There's a lot of discrimination, and there's a lot of, you know, pressure not only on youth but throughout the communities. And you know, those are things, Ken, that you've been fighting for and against all your life, and you've been in the forefront of doing things with communities in this area to try to help kind of equalize, you know, people's, you know, perceptions.
But there's something that's happened with respect to this particular event that has galvanized not just the LGBT community, but the country at large, and that is the issue of guns and military-style weapons.
Correct.
In fact, almost immediately, last Monday night, you know, that the Sarasota City Commission debated a resolution asking the state to do something about military-style weapons, because the state has passed a law in Florida that prohibits cities and counties from regulating guns. What Equality Florida has done and what the League of Women Voters has done is they've joined together at the state level in a coalition of organizations to work for gun control, for sensible, common sense, sane gun control. And that means we've got to seriously look at this military-style, semi-automatic and automatic weapon rifles that people are buying and using for these mass killings. That's in half or more of those mass killings around the United States. That's the weapon that's been used.
And you know, it's really unfortunate. You know, recently, you know, the Democrats staged a sit-in on the floor of the Capitol. You know, trying to bring some kind of resolution. And I think also, if you look at some of the tragedies that are all fresh in all of our memories, the San Bernardino and the Sandy Hook and the events that have taken place in Chattanooga, for example. Those were all done with that. And that's a serious and critical issue. And I've heard, and I want to just throw this out there for you, that people say, well, this kind of event, well, could have happened anywhere. Could have happened at Disney. Could have happened at a ball field. Could have well, it didn't. It happened in an LGBT community on a Latin night that was targeted because of the fact that people were vulnerable and they were there. And I want to put that out because this, I believe, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, is the type of event that's going to be impactful for the LGBT community for years to come. This is kind of a catalyst for people to be able to come together and say, we cannot allow this type of hate and violence to escalate. And what were you going to say, Valerie?
I have a couple of thoughts in response to what you just said. The first thing that came to me was, you know, in my real life, I'm a therapist, and I had a client this week that came in who also identifies as gay, who said, they didn't do anything after they murdered those little children. They're definitely not going to do anything because they hurt us. And that's the sense of just reality, I think, that our community feels. Like, why would they make any changes simply because it was us? The other point that I wanted to just touch on was that you said because we're a vulnerable community. Well, I think I think any bar or club would have people who were, their minds are not on, oh, I must offend, I mean, it was just, as Ken said, they were there to have a good time. So I think any bar or club or entertainment kind of a venue would have been equally as vulnerable. I think what makes us vulnerable is the lack of protection that we have under the laws of our country, under the laws of the state of Florida, and the fight that we've had to participate in order to make any gains that we have. So, for example, and I think that many people are shocked when they learn. I've mentioned to a few people, well, it is tragic what happened, and unfortunately for the survivors, the people who were wounded, if they were not out at their workplace, they could be fired. And people say, what do you mean they could be fired? Well, there are no protections. There are no human rights protections.
And I would say to anybody who is that and had to suffer through that and they're wounded and to have any employer kind of react in that way is a greater injustice, and it would be a terrible thing. However, the point that I think you're trying to make is that an employer is within their rights to be able to do that, because there is no job protection.
Right.
Well, I'm much more hopeful, though. I really am very hopeful because of the reaction that the country at large has had in the last couple of weeks to this event. But I'm also hopeful because the LGBT community nationwide has made incredible, rapid progress in the last 50 years with respect to civil rights. And I think that now the gay community is galvanized by this event. They're going to act and they're going to push. It's a smart community. It's an articulate community. They have money and they have determination. They're motivated to fix this problem, just as they've worked to fix other problems with respect to discrimination. We're going to work harder for human rights ordinances, and we're going to work harder for sensible, common sense gun control.
And I think all of it has to come in hand. And as I mentioned earlier, and you've spent a good portion of your life working on the behalf of equality. With the Supreme Court decision in the Florida, things are changed. It's a better community because of those changes. But as you were mentioning, there's still efforts that need to be made.
Work to do.
And I think they need to be made across the board, not only for the sense of protections and guarantees, but also for the sense of trying to stem this violence, and violence, whether it's by spoken word, because I think that's just hate speech in a lot of the conditions, but it's also the violence that comes through the barrel of a gun, and especially automatic weapons that are out there. So there's work that still needs to be done, and being the vocal person that you are, Ken.
My big mouth you're talking about.
I mean that in a positive, constructive sense, but being the person that you are, you really have to, bring people to the table for that sense of understanding of what can be done and what should be done.
Well, I think that there's a difference in this with respect to this event and others that have affected the LGBT community, and that is that the public at large is as angry about what's happened as we are. But in addition to that, I think we need, as a country, to sit down and examine the way we communicate with each other, the way we interact with each other, the way we treat each other. Because it's not very nice, and the current political campaign is a very good example of what I'm talking about. The mean-spirited kind of accusations that fly across the room all the time.
You think, well, nothing can be said that's going to top that, and then a week later, there's a
another
whole other flurry of
Exactly.
things. And I think that kind of discourse, sets the tone for people that are out there. Now, what you've done, and you have the capacity, and Valerie, your work with the youth in this community and other communities is really noteworthy. It becomes incumbent upon you to kind of open those doors for greater conversations, for in-depth type things. working with perhaps, law enforcement or government to see how can we foster that sense of communication, that we have that sense of inclusion. And you're doing that all the time, aren't you, Valerie?
Well, we're here. We're making outreach into the community wherever we can. Part of what we do with our youth is to involve them in the community, not only in the LGBT community,
Exactly.
but in the community at large, because we want to make certain that they feel included and that they're recognized for who they are. So
Right.
we're here and we're willing and ready to do that. I mean, in the past, I have made outreach to the school board and spoken with social workers at the schools in Manatee County and gotten a pretty good reception.
Great.
Just to make sure that they know that we exist and that if they should have a youth who may be questioning or troubled or just feeling some kind of oppression at home or in school, would know that there is a safe place. But while I'm doing that, I'm also reaching out to the community and educating. I think one of the things that is incumbent upon LGBT people is to be that kind of person who is out. I think it's difficult for some people to be out because of the previous backlash. But I
Right.
think at this point in time, I think it's really important for the community as a whole to recognize that we're here and we're part of the community. We're teachers and law enforcement and
It's the spectrum.
Right,
Well, I
exactly.
think it's the thing the single one thing that has made the difference with respect to the LGBT civil rights movement, and that is being out. When you know that you have a brother or a father or an uncle or an aunt who is LGBT and you love them and you know what kind of people they are aren't
Exactly.
evil demons,
Exactly.
then it's easy to be more accepting. But there are some very practical things that we can do in the community. For example, the Harvey Milk Festival a year ago, May, had some fundamentalist church members from a church in Myakka come with bullhorns and signs and say very hateful things for hours on end. So a group of us went to the police department, we went to the city attorney, we got a draft put together of a series of guidelines that could be used by the police in order to manage these kinds of outbursts of
Hate speech.
Right.
then we could be helpful. And so we did that, and they used that information or those guidelines at the Harvey Milk Festival this year. But at the vigil last week in Sarasota, it made a difference because there were lots of police there, and there were ambulances there to help people in case something went wrong. The support that we got from the police department made a major difference in the way people felt about being there.
Right.
And I think what
Right.
yeah, I think what you've done, again, through your leadership and your kind of vision and Valerie's inclusion on projects, I think what's happening is that sense of, we require the same respect and the same inclusion
Right.
as anybody else.
Absolutely.
As anybody else.
Why shouldn't we get it?
And that's a clear thing. And it hasn't always been like that. But I think, over the years, you've seen that recently, the Supreme Court decision, things that have happened in Sarasota, and man, things have changed. And I would suggest to you that because of this event, you don't want to see that all those positive things that have happened slide. You want to be able to come forward even more so, and for education, for inclusion, and as part of your rightful place within every community, not just this community, but every community.
Yeah. Well, it's going to make a difference. The future looks bright. I'm encouraged. I think that this event will provide a turning point, just like Stonewall bar riots did in 1969, was it? I think it's going to make a difference. the coverage that the media has given to this event in Orlando has been absolutely incredible. If you look at television stations, cable television stations, you see the ribbon with Orlando across it, playing continuously on these television
and I think
stations.
that, yeah, as you mentioned, the Rays did a great, wonderful thing. Sort of Orlando, it's a wonderful turnout. It's that sense of inclusion, but you always constantly have to be moving forward. And I think that's a key thing. And I think, Ken, your efforts in the cities moving forward with the domestic partner registry have been, like one of the key things that have really helped this community in a wide variety of ways. And Valerie, your efforts with youth has been exceptional. The Prism Youth thing, you have a Manatee Pride Day, which is continuously kind of grown and prosper. If I remember the first one, not so much, but you've really grown. So you have that sense of your outreach is continuously there, and the support that you provide is always there.
Right. One thing also that I want to make a point about that kind of ties some of this together is speaks to a little bit of what Ken was saying before about the discourse in our culture these days about the negatives. And what I have seen from the LGBTQ community is we're very aware. We're very aware that there are certain people that would like to separate us and to have us turn into a us against them kind of a mentality. But I've seen nothing but love and just openness from the LGBT community. In other words, we're not holding a particular terrorist group responsible for this. We know that it comes from hate. And so we also know that the way to overcome hate is by reaching out with love. And that has really been what I've seen at all the vigils and any place that I have been
It's an excellent point, Valerie. I think you really have. You've seen, and this community, Manatee and Sarasota, are wonderful communities. They're full of, caring, giving people that really, responded to this tragedy in a wonderful way. And again, we just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to kind of get some final comments from you. As we all know, this tragedy it targeted the LGBT community. It targeted, because clearly. And as a result of that, this impact of that will kind of be there for years to come. Your efforts with young people is really to be applauded, Valerie, but there's still work to be done. Is that correct?
Right. Well, again, there is still work to be done. There's, first of all, work to be done with the LGBT community who lived through this. I think helping to normalize the feelings that they're having. The therapist hat comes back on. I mean, obviously the first, and really anybody who's affected by this, shock, disbelief, and denial, and then working through the emotions that you feel. I think anger is a normal part of working through the emotions and of grief. But ultimately what we would hope is that everyone would come to a new sense of working towards doing something. When you have a sense of loss and you have a sense of grief and you have a sense of anger, anger can give us energy. And we can use that energy to move in a positive way with each other and also to further the laws and
Very much so.
the
efforts that are being made throughout the nation.
Sure.
And I must say so, having seen some of the efforts that you've done with the prison, these are great young people, and they're full of energy, they're very smart, they're full of, that enthusiasm that youth has, to do things. And I would think, and I would, suggest that, those are the faces of the individuals that are going to be able to affect change, in the next 10 years or the next 20 years.
Right.
These are the people that you're nurturing that'll be part of, the ongoing public outreach.
Well, I think this too has been a little bit of a hello to them, because some of the youth have come up in a time where we have made tremendous strides in the last 50 years, and some of us have been around for a lot of those strides. But some of the youth have just sort of expected things to be the way that they are and to continue to get better. I think that this has been kind of a little bit of a wake-up call that, hey, we can't take this for granted, you know, and we're just going to keep going. One of the things that we're encouraging them to do is to keep going. We're going up as a group to St. Pete Pride, which is happening on this weekend. We're going up for the parade together anyway, and we want to encourage them and to support them and to keep them focused on a future and on community.
And I think that's wonderful. And, you know, under your leadership and guidance, you know, these young people have a lot to look forward to.
Thank you.
And Ken, you know, I want to kind of end with you, if I may. You know, what you've done for the LGBT community, Sarasota, Manatee, and all the many other cities in this community is something to be really applauded. You know, it's about equality, it's about equal rights. It's all about, you know, being part of this community that's the human race. And your efforts are really commendable. But in the big picture, Ken, there's still work to be done. There's still a lot of hate out there.
Absolutely.
And as you know, some people have reacted, well, you know, so what? The 49 people were killed. So what? They had it coming. Well, that's, you know, that's really, you know, the worst response that anyone could ever give. But your work is just kind of an ongoing set of circumstances.
Well, absolutely. You know, many of these mass killings in the United States up to now have not generated much follow-up, much action on the part of the government or the community at large. But I think there's a difference. There's a difference with this mass shooting. The victims of that shooting have a constituency. The other victims, like the children in Newtown, had their parents, but they didn't have a constituency. And other victims have not had the constituency that the LGBT community has. And we will work. We will not take this sitting down. We're going to work to make this better. And the whole country is going to benefit. And I think the country sees that. I think you see a lot of support in the country for the way we feel. And you saw what happened in Congress this week, where there was a sit-down by legislators. Something is going to happen. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take some time, but we're going to get there, and we're going to get control of the hate, and we're going to get control of the guns.
And I think, and it's very eloquent, Ken, and you know, applaud that, you know, that kind of, you know, effort, you know, that has to be put forth. But I would say this, is that those efforts that need to be put forth, what could be a better legacy to those 49 victims than to make a considerable change? Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to, first of all, welcome you both back at any time to talk about other issues and concerns that you might have that affect the LGBT community. And I must say, Valerie, you know, congratulations on all the things that you've done with prison. Continued good luck on all the things that you, and hopefully for your next Manatee Pride event, you know, the weather will be bright and sunny, no thunderstorms and downpours, which kind of mar it.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. But again, you know, your leadership with Prison Youth Initiative is to really be applauded, and it's a great organization and does a great community service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ken, again, thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts and effort.
My pleasure.
It's always get a lot of insight. And unfortunately, you know, we're talking on the heels of a terrible national tragedy that, you know, affected everyone in this country with a conscience. You know, it impacted everyone. You know, young people, seniors, you know, the right, the left. It affected
families,
everybody. And you know, to be able to have this kind of conversation is important because, you know, you want to look behind and see what's in front. And I think, you know, sharing your thoughts and insight has been very valuable. And I want to thank both of you for taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you
thanks for asking.
And thank you for joining us on this special edition of Up Close on METV. If you want to find out any additional information about the Prison Youth Initiative or Equality Florida, look at the websites that we've been displaying on the screen. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Up Close on METV.